Kia ora, welcome to the Cleine Line. I'm Jamie Cleine, Mayor of Bulla, and this podcast is a place for honest conversations about local government, life on the coast, and everything in between. This isn't the official council line, it's my personal take, with no spin, no script, just open reflections on what's happening in our communities, around the council table, and sometimes from the halls of Parliament too. Today, we're diving into what came out of the 2025 Local Government New Zealand Conference, held down in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, in the magnificent Te Pai Conference Centre right there in the square. There were some big signals from central government, some clear expectations, some genuine opportunities, and a few red flags worth paying attention to. I've clipped up some audio, so you'll hear some clips and comments from the ministers themselves. But most importantly, I want to look at what it means for us here in Bulla. There was lots of national media coverage of the LGNZ conference this year, and members of the public could certainly be forgiven for thinking that the relationship between central and local government was particularly adversarial. So it was fantastic to hear our local government minister, Simon Watts, begin his presentation or speech to the conference with the following clip.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the contributions that you make to your communities. You play a really significant and important role in terms of the lifeblood and the energy and the economic potential of our provinces, our regions, our towns and our cities, and that is hugely acknowledged.
Well, certainly nice to hear a thank you from the local government minister. One of the things driving the public rhetoric that indicates or would have you believe that local government is all bad and central government needs to sort us out has been the significant rate rises in recent years that local government has had to inflict upon residents. Now, it was interesting to have some recognition that this is in part at least driven by central government regulation passed down for local government to enact or comply with without the funding or support of central government in many cases. This couldn't be made more clear than by the comments from the Deputy Prime Minister, David Seymour.
That a lot of the people who may be chief executives, maybe planning officers who work through our councils, have a pretty tough rep as well. And my message here today is that I do think change is necessary. I don't want to come here and point the finger and tell you that you're all hopeless and you're putting up prices and everyone's angry at you. Certainly true that 12.2% is a very steep rate rise, but it is also true that many of the challenges that councils face are actually generated by the statutory instruments which they are forced to follow. And so I believe that we actually, here's a radical idea, want the same thing. We want affordable and effective local government delivering services that no one else in the community can deliver.
Another key driver of rates increases for many councils, and Bulla is certainly no exception, is the large increases of inflationary pressure in the building and construction sector. So that's things like all the supplies for your pipes, network infrastructure, roads, bridges and construction have all gone up in the range of 20 to 30% in many cases. With councils playing catch up with infrastructure all across New Zealand and the government asking us to do that, and our communities too for that matter, that also is a significant driver of rates increases. You can't play catch up without paying the piper. The Honourable Chris Bishop was also a speaker at the conference, and his opening salvo made it very clear that his expectations were that councils would be making some very difficult decisions in the months and years to come.
People do not elect you to make easy decisions, they elect you to make the tough ones. I think this year, elected members will be judged by New Zealand for their commitment to growing their economies and their regions. They'll be judged on whether or not they're going to help the housing crisis hinder it.
And so Minister Bishop then went on to talk us through some of his changes planned to the Resource Management Act. That's clearly significant and there's some major changes on the way, one of which was to suspend plan making that is underway for many councils across New Zealand. Now, for the West Coast, obviously what immediately jumps to mind is the Te Tai o Pulteney Plan, or the TTPP. Now, unfortunately, that misses the window to cease progress on that by about 18 months. You see, the reason for this is that plans that are already in the notified stage and going through hearings and the submissions and things that TTPP has done must still continue under the old legislation. And so onwards it is for TTPP on the West Coast. However, that doesn't mean that all is lost, and those significant national direction instruments that the Minister is planning as part of his reform will certainly be implemented into the TTPP as they come through, because they are a higher order or higher hierarchy document. And so there'll be plenty of change to the TTPP in coming years, with most of the legislation expected to change from about 2027. So Minister Bishop's reforms of the RMA essentially embrace a repeal and replace strategy, starting from scratch with new, more streamlined legislation. And it appears as though there's an appetite for quite rapid transition to the new arrangements. So the new system is argued to be simpler, faster, and more focused on development. It's going to limit the number of consents, shorten the timeframes to get consent, and reduce costs to applicants, especially for housing and infrastructure type developments. So I think people can expect a clearer distinction between what local does versus what national responsibilities are, and far fewer overlapping regulations, which should make it a lot simpler. So local authorities will still write their own plans, and these are likely to be developed regionally, which is very much similar to what the TTPP has done on the West Coast, but they have to align with those national priorities, especially those targets around infrastructure delivery. The RMA reforms, of course, already have in place the fast-track consenting, which speeds up major projects to bypass some of the lengthy processes via ministerial referral and that panel-based approval system. So that really should accelerate some of those nationally significant infrastructure and regional development projects, which again is very exciting for projects on the West Coast. So in summary, Chris Bishop's message was pretty blunt. He wants faster, clearer consenting, more housing, and fewer bespoke rules. But let's be honest, simplifying planning doesn't magically solve everything. We still need resourcing. We still need flexibility that respects the unique nature of our place. And we need government support to actually deliver the homes, infrastructure, and services we're planning for. Again, that's going to take a meaningful collaboration between local government, our stakeholders, and, of course, central government themselves. Minister for Local Government Simon Watts also talked to the conference about his recently introduced Local Government Systems Improvements Bill.
So that systems improvement legislation that's coming into play clearly outlines what are those 5 key areas and core services. And that is important because it highlights network infrastructure, public transport, waste management, civil defence, parks, recreation, museums. Those are the 5 areas. We all have our differing views around the well-beings and those aspects, but I can think fair to say that the broadness of those definitions means that pretty much every activity is in the scope.
So much was being made in the public media about the removal of the 4 well-beings, and did that mean that councils could no longer fund the local swimming pool or the library or, do community beautification projects and the like? So the Minister's explanation or clarification there that those things are firmly in scope, especially if they are activities that no one else from a commercial point of view is going to pick up the tab for and take responsibility for in the community. So that recognises recognises that, that kind of amenity value, the recreational, the community facilities are all part of what makes people want to live, visit and invest in communities, and hence play a key role in the economic development, the ability to retain staff or attract staff and people to reside in the district are all enhanced by some of those things that otherwise we would have said fit under the wellbeing banner. But clearly these changes to the Local Government Act will still enable those to happen, which in my view is really important and a great recognition by the local government minister that the government values those and recognises that unique role that councils play in delivering those services. Minister Watts also showed his understanding not only of the local government sector, but I think begins to tie together the various reform work streams of the government more generally, and perhaps how they will relate and ease the pressure on not only local government, but the communities that we all serve. So he talked a little bit about local water done well, and he certainly praised councils for our efforts there by working together with our neighbours in many cases, and gave some really good examples of successful implementation that's already underway at Selwyn Water and Hamilton Waikato water service delivery plans. And he really urged us to continue that momentum towards delivery and collaboration so that we start locking in some of those benefits sooner rather than later. He also talked a bit about city and regional deals and acknowledged that there are 3 initial regional deals already signed with Auckland, Western Bay of Plenty and Queenstown Lakes. Now, the West Coast certainly put a bid into the regional deals framework, and we're sort of heartened to hear that the government is quite keen to progress those and provide those sort of 10-year partnerships with central and local government to start getting that sort of pipeline of infrastructure together, unlocking some of the regulatory burdens and beginning to get some certainty into the direction for local and central government working together. Here's what he had to say about these.
We need to be and must be bold in those plans. 10-year deals. Certainty is often underestimated but has so much power and benefit. Start doing further MOUs with more councils and more regions next year, and we just get a good cadence of those delivery things on. If we can get that right, if we can get council, local government, central government, iwi Māori, private sector working together to execute the infrastructure projects in our cities and regions that will drive economic growth, productivity and jobs, hell, that is the biggest change that we could deliver over the status quo.
In my view, Minister Watts' speech set a really clear and firm direction for local government. That's the obvious focus on core services, transparency and financial discipline, supported by central government's commitment to reduce the regulatory burden and invest through regional deals, and encouraging us to collaborate wherever possible. His tone was supportive, I think, but quite resolute. They want to deliver some tools for reform, but they expect us to deliver and some accountability for that delivery in return. And I think that's all pretty positive and really great clarity that we're starting to see from this government now. The political presentations by the various ministers over the 2 days of the conference were further broken down by legal advisor Mike Wakefield, who's a partner at legal firm Simpson and Grierson. Now, Mike does work and advises councils all across New Zealand, including the Buller District Council. And he sort of summed up the various changes, really pointing to the alignment between central and local government in terms of public service and our community well-being, despite us having those different roles. He pointed out the previous iterations of the 4 well-beings and that they have been in and out of the Local Government Act, driven by different political ideologies for the last 10 to 20 years, and that, effectively the actual delivery of services that local government has been able to do during that time has changed very little, recognising that so many of those community services that we deliver, nobody else does, and that communities expect them to be done. He talked a little bit also about other parts of the Systems Improvements Bill around code of conduct and governance culture, where the legislation looks to standardise codes of conduct and standing orders by which councils operate meetings. And again, I think those changes are potentially really useful to perhaps strengthen the standards and internal accountability among elected members and, make things just a little bit more professional in terms of how we operate, which is certainly something that I think would enhance local government significantly. And finally, Mike reiterated the need for councils to lean into reforms such as this, sparking a little bit of a warning, I guess, that a lot of what's being proposed in some of the government legislation that we've talked about in this podcast really speaks to a centralisation of decision-making away from local government. And that is, certainly quite a change of flavour for our community to understand, and certainly a time for local government to look to understand, work with our communities and work with central government to make sure that we can try to align strategies and, again, achieve those outcomes of affordability and efficiency through growth that these new policies and new regulations look to achieve. My key takeaway from the conference is that central and local government are actually more aligned on what we're all trying to achieve than perhaps the public would realise. Now is a time for steady leadership, established relationships, and importantly, collaboration with our community, local government, our stakeholders, and central government. Because actually working together on the same problems, we all serve the same people, achieves a greater outcome in the long term. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to the Cleine Line. This podcast is here to spark conversation, share a bit of insight, and shine a light on the things that matter to Buller. But I also want to hear what matters to you. If there's an issue you'd like my thoughts on, someone in the community we should feature, or a topic you think deserves some airtime, send me an email, jamie@thecleineline.com. I'll be back next time with more updates, reflections, and what's been happening around the district. Until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk again soon.